We are talking about the Corporate Transparency Act. This is part 2 of the video. If you missed part 1 or you didn't see it, go find part 1. That's where I will explain what the Corporate Transparency Act is and why it came into play, and a summarized version of what is expected with the Corporate Transparency Act. In this video, I just want to point out some terms that are used quite often when we're talking about the Corporate Transparency Act, so that you're better able to follow along when these terms are actually thrown out there. You'll know what they mean. So let's just first start with the Corporate Transparency Act. Now, we already talked about it in the first video that it became legislation, enacted law in 2021. And this became part of the National Defense Authorization Act that required certain business entities to report their information on their business owners with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, with FinCEN. So that is what the Corporate Transparency Act is, summarized in a nutshell. If you want to get a fuller understanding of it, please look at video 1. Part 1. Now, reporting company, you're going to hear this term used when we're talking about the Corporate Transparency Act, the reporting company. This is the heart of everything that we're talking about. So reporting company is a corporation, a company, or entity that was created by filing a document with the Secretary of State under the laws of the U.S. or Indian tribe, and if it was created under a foreign country, that it's registered to do business in the U.S. or a tribal jurisdictions, filing a document with the Secretary of State or similar office of the state or tribe. So, as I mentioned in video 1, you may hear individuals talk about the Corporate Transparency Act and they only reference an LLC. When you're talking about a reporting company, you're talking about more than the LLC. A reporting company, again, according to the Corporate Transparency Act, is a corporation, a company, or any entity that was created by filing a document with the Secretary of State under the U.S. law. It's also a company who was originated or may have been originated under a foreign country who registered to do business in the U.S. under U.S. state or tribal jurisdictions by filing the necessary documents with the Secretary of State or a similar office. So when I say reporting company, that is who it applies to, not just an LLC. Beneficial ownership information reports. You're going to hear this, right? So you're going to hear the BOIR, the Beneficial Ownership Information Reports. This is actually what is the information that is being reported to identify the beneficial owners of a reporting company. So the beneficial owner information reports identifies the beneficial owners, the company applicants, and any information about that entity itself. So there's 3 levels of reporting that you're going to submit to FinCEN, which is, again, the reporting company is going to report information about the beneficial owners. They're going to report information about the company applicants, and they're going to report information about that particular entity itself. So all that information is going to be reported, and that is the definition of beneficial ownership information reports. It's not just about owners, it's those 3 levels. Now, a beneficial owner, that is any individual who directly or indirectly exercises substantial control or ownership interest of 25% of that company. So when you hear individuals say, or you hear me say, we're looking at the beneficial owner. The beneficial owner has to submit this information. Don't limit it to someone who says they just owned the company. Beneficial ownership applies to any individual who directly or indirectly exercises substantial control or who has ownership interest of 25%. And again, we'll talk more about that and you have more examples, but that is a beneficial owner. So the beneficial owner must report their information. Substantial control, as I just mentioned, according to the Corporate Transparency Act, substantial control is having the authority as a senior officer You have the authority to appoint or remove certain officers or majority directors. You can make you can make important decisions. So you're an important decision maker, or any other type of substantial control that you may have over the reporting company. And so that little catch-all, any other substantial control, can be measured in so many different ways. But those are the ways where you are considered to have substantial control. Ownership interest. So like I just said, to be a beneficial owner, you have substantial control, which I just defined, or ownership interest. So the Corporate Transparency Act defines ownership interest, that 25% can be possessed either through equity stock, voting rights, profit sharing, convertibles, options, any type of contracts, if there's a contract, or any mechanism used to establish ownership. So they have a catch-all with that too. So if any mechanism is established to reflect that you have at least 25% ownership in a company, then you have an ownership interest. Company applicant. Remember we said you have to report the beneficial owner and you have to report a company applicant? According to the Corporate Transparency Act, a company applicant is either a direct filer or individual who controls the filing. So it's either someone who literally took the paperwork and filed it with the Secretary of State, or someone who controlled that filing and someone submitted it. So say if there was, I as an attorney had my paralegal submit the information to the Secretary of State, but I controlled all of the paperwork for her to or him to submit, then we are company applicants. So with someone who either directly filed or individual who controls the filing. It's an individual, so it's not going to be a company. So a company can't be, a company itself or a legal entity cannot be a company applicant. The individual who do it. So if I do it through my law firm, which I do, so I establish LLCs, I establish corporations, I am the attorney that does it, but I wouldn't put my law firm, Cyre de Jure legal firm, down as the company applicant. I would have to report myself, the individual, as the company applicant. And if I register, someone it applies to, if I register entities as the regular course of my business, then I can use my business address, but I'm not going to use my actual business as the company applicant. I am the individual who's the company applicant, and then the address that I use will be my business address. Now, if you're someone who does not register corporations, companies, entities as your regular course of business, you report yourself as a company applicant, but you're going to use your personal address. All right, the last term is FinCEN identifier. And this is a unique identifying number that holds all of the required information. So the information that you are required to report to FinCEN is going to all be that information that is tied to a FinCEN identifier, and that will be a unique number for the beneficial owner and or company applicant that they can use anytime they make a report, or when a beneficial owner reports information and they report a company applicant, they can just put that company applicant FinCEN number. When they put that number, all the information tied to it is just there. Now, there is right now some murky feelings on the FinCEN identifier, although it sounds easier to do because that FinCEN identifier number has all the information and you don't always have to repeat it. If you have to report yourself as a beneficial owner or a company applicant, you just put that number. However, as of right now, if you have a FinCEN identifier number and you have no affiliation with that company anymore, you still have to keep the FinCEN number updated. So when your information changed, that the 4 pieces of information that goes to the FinCEN number, your name, your address, driver license, whatever that identifying ID is, things like that, that has to constantly be updated, you still have to update it, even if you have no affiliation with that company. They did say that they're trying to work on that, but we'll get more into that later. I just want you to know what the FinCEN identifier is. So those are the important key terms for you to know: Corporate Transparency Act, reporting company, beneficial ownership information report, beneficial owner, substantial control, ownership interest, company applicant, and FinCEN identifier. Now that you have those terms, you will hear those terms throughout in the remaining videos.